Have you ever wondered why, after a loss, you suddenly can't remember simple things? You keep missing deadlines, forgetting appointments. Many grieving people assume that they're becoming lazy, distracted, or incapable. But actually, grief is temporarily changing how your brain functions. And today, we're talking about executive dysfunction, one of the most frustrating experiences that can accompany grief. Welcome to Grief Space. I'm Lisa Kelly, workplace grief coach and founder of Spacious Corner Coaching. I help grieving professionals navigate the difficult space between personal loss and workplace expectations. Through coaching, education, and my Pearls method, I help people understand how grief affects productivity, energy, rest, decision making, and daily function so they can move forward with greater self compassion and practical support. Today, we're exploring a topic that touches nearly every grieving person at some point. It's executive dysfunction. And my guest today is Dr. Sol Garcia. Welcome, Sol. Sol is an executive functioning consultant. She's an educator, researcher, founder of Plan with Soul. Through her work, she helps individuals understand how their brains work, identify executive functioning challenges, and develop practical systems that reduce overwhelm and increase confidence. Her personal experiences with miscarriage, postpartum depression, and executive dysfunction led her to create the support she wishes had existed during one of the most difficult seasons of her life. And today, she's helping us understand why grief often affects our ability to plan, focus, remember, organize, and follow through, and then what we can do about it. I want to welcome you, Sol. For listeners who may have never heard the term executive dysfunction before, what exactly is it?
Well, hi Lisa. Thank you for having
Hi.
me. This is so exciting.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of yours, Lisa, and
No.
to be here.
Mm.
Executive dysfunction or executive function are a set of skills that we use to describe what helps us get things done in life. So, when we think of our brain, we have a part in the front of our brain, right behind our forehead, that's called the prefrontal cortex. And it takes about 3 decades to fully develop, sometimes more, sometimes less, but generally speaking, about 3 decades for the prefrontal cortex to fully develop. In that area of the brain lives many, many parts that help you succeed in life. And so some of those skills are your ability to start tasks, your ability to complete tasks, even your ability to identify which tasks to start with. And so that part of the brain is very sensitive to various aspects of life. Your executive functioning skills are thriving when you get great sleep, when you eat nutritious meals, when you are at peace, when you experience joy, when you wake up in the morning and you think, wow, that was some restful sleep. Now, I don't know about you, but it's been a while since I've been able to check off all those boxes. And
Definitely.
and so that those are examples of when we are experiencing executive functioning at its peak. But we all know that life is complicated and full of unexpected events, including death. For me, it was a miscarriage. When I first got pregnant, my very first pregnancy ever was a miscarriage. And I'd heard of it like just on the periphery of people mentioning it, but I didn't know anyone personally that experienced miscarriage. And so when it happened to me, I realized that it took me weeks to recover, physically, certainly, but emotionally and also mentally. At the time, I was working at a large, let's say, corporation, and the stakes were high. And this was a time when I could tell that mentally I just could not perform at the exact same level that I used to. And I started doing some research on what the impact of a miscarriage may have on my productivity. And one of the things I learned is that executive functioning skills tend to decline when we have less sleep, less moments of joy and peace. And I realized that I was grieving the loss of a pregnancy loss and also experiencing executive dysfunction. And having the name executive dysfunction for me was a relief, truly. I mean, it felt very heavy at first. Like, what do you mean dysfunction? Are you calling me dysfunctional? But in some ways, there were parts of my brain that weren't functioning at its peak performance, and I just knew, I could tell I was not doing well. And then fast forward a few years later, when my father passed away, I ended up feeling this similar fog. People describe it sometimes as like brain fog. And, oh, I went and through another rabbit hole, here and learned, my goodness, like, it's happening, I can feel it. Like, this was a season in my life where paper piles were just, like, hiding in closets and in junk drawers, and I had all of this unopened mail or half-opened envelopes, crumbled receipts, and to be honest, my home looked organized and relatively clean, but I knew where the things were that I was trying to hide, and the truth is that, like, if you open certain closet doors or drawers, like, my dysfunction was there for all to see. I also experienced postpartum depression. Back in 2019, I got pregnant with my first child, delivered my first child, and, soon after, we know what happened in 2020. I felt like I had no, safety net. I think no one did. It was a scary time in society. No one really knew what to expect. The air itself felt scary, and so we were indoors a lot with a baby. And this was a time for me where I could feel that same mental weight that I could recognize. And so between a miscarriage, postpartum depression, and the death of my father, those three things led me to create this work because I realized that through all of these particular slices of life that brought me to down to my knees truly in pure grief in many ways, I realized, like, I was doing individual therapy, group therapy. I was taking antidepressants. I was doing my best to have a good sleep routine and eating on a regular basis, and yet I could not shake that cognitive weight, that brain fog. I dug so deep on podcasts and books and I came across some amazing researchers that made me realize there's a lot of information that lives in the research world and great articles that are written with results that can impact our day-to-day lives. But I didn't see a lot of opportunities or individuals that were translating that research into practical life. And so I decided to found Plan with Soul as an opportunity to bring research to life. And so when grieving, as we all know, Lisa has this wonderful Pearls method. We know that there are steps to help us through this grieving process.
Yeah.
The P in Pearls, the productivity one, is one that I focus on a whole lot, and I love that it comes first, and I'll tell you why. In my own experience, when I was taking medication, I was doing individual therapy, I was doing group therapy, I was doing all of the things that people said I needed to do. At the end of all of those sessions, I still had those bills that needed to be paid. I still had those emails that needed to be sent. And those responsibilities just had so much weight on me. Yes, medication made me feel better. Yes, therapy made me feel better. But at the end of all of those sessions, I still had a ton of work to do. And I found that when I executed my priorities, when I was productive, I could sleep better at night. Now, I was still either mourning or having a difficult time, but that productivity, the ability to check things off this list of like truly important priorities, not just like uh, wash dishes, clean clothes and or wash clothes and clean the house, but like true like deliverables or items that have real consequences if they don't get executed. Those executing those priorities made me feel better. And I wouldn't say that the brain fog went away and disappeared right away, but there was this level of clarity, mental clarity, where I would wake up in the morning and I had just one priority per day. And
Good,
that one
good.
priority lives on my nightstand so that when I wake up in the morning, it is the first thing I see, even before my phone.
Yes,
And that is
yes.
my number one job before anything else. And that gives me a sense of direction, especially on mornings when I'm not feeling my best. I will say
So,
your prose method, starting with the P, I just have to say I commend you for adding productivity there because I will say action breeds confidence.
you give yourself that dopamine hit and you get that motivation to continue to do more.
That's right.
So, doing, it's just to get yourself to go and do that first step. So, as Soul mentioned, know the night before what you're going to do in the morning so that you end up stuck. And then when you end up stuck, you end up in a situation where it's shame based. You don't want you don't want to be known for paying your bills late. You don't want to have unopened mail. You don't want your desk to be a mess. That becomes a shame based situation. That just adds to your pain and your executive dysfunction, doesn't it? So,
100%.
the great thing about executive dysfunction, if there's anything great about it, you learned that it can be predicted.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. This is it's like one of those things where I see someone who is struggling. Let's say someone is taking care of their spouse who is in hospice care. I can almost sense of the pain that that person is going through. And I can, and I think many of us can, almost predict that they're going to have less sleep, they may feel more sadness, and they may feel more stress. And so these are the S's that I look out for. If you are in a season or entering a season in which there are maybe some sadness, some sleep deprivation, or some stress, more than the norm, like more than normal, then that may forecast for you in a possibility that your executive functioning skills may decline. That's not to say all of your skills, but some of them, particularly the skills that you struggle with when things are relatively par for the course. So let's say, for instance, that you normally have a hard time with showing up to places on time. So you are generally considered a late person. You tend to sort of scramble at the last minute or underestimate how much time it'll take you to get somewhere or how long it'll take you to get something done. That is something that in executive functioning world we would call time blindness. So if you struggle with time blindness in general, first of all, I want to say you can seek help for that. Reach out to me. But also you can reach out, you can do research on time blindness and how to get some coping mechanisms there. But when you are experiencing sadness, stress, sleep deprivation, your time blindness may be exponential. So if you are normally 10 minutes late and you are grieving and you are already known for being late and you're not sleeping well, you're stressed, you're sad, your time blindness may be more extreme than usual. And so what usually may be a 10-15 minute delay for you may turn into like a 30-45 minute delay. And with that, what you were saying, Lisa, back to like the shame that we oftentimes live with when we feel like we are either underperforming or not meeting expectations, particularly at work. There is such a heaviness that comes with that, that is just added weight to what is already a very heavy time. And so, any opportunity that you can to, number one, identify what your executive functioning skills look like at like baseline, That is an assessment that I offer to all listeners. You can text me directly with Lisa Kelly, so I know Lisa Kelly is sending you. And when you send me your text, I will send you your complimentary executive functioning assessment. And what that assessment will do, it will give you a number that will help you understand where your executive functioning skills are at the time of your self-reported assessment. And the reason why I say get your baseline is because at the very least, you know where you stand today. And let's say in 12 months, you are starting to feel better and you feel like the pearls method has really helped you. You've been working with Lisa and you feel like you are back on your feet, you are welcome to come in for a post test. I will also offer that complimentary, assuming you work with Lisa, and get that comparison and see how much impact the pros method had on you, and see if your baseline number for your executive functioning skills increased. And hopefully they did. Likewise, if your number decreases because you decided that you couldn't get additional support, let's say, or you had one thing after another happen, and so now you're not just grieving, but there are so many other transitions that are happening that were unexpected. It is important to know which part of your prefrontal cortex is in need of most help. Just a few months ago, I was 40 pounds overweight. Now I'm 30 pounds overweight. Why? Well, yeah, diet and exercise, right? But also, like, I didn't go to a mechanic and ask the mechanic to help me lose the weight. I went to a personal trainer and asked that personal trainer to help me lose weight. And so that is the gap, is if you are grieving and you feel like you have paper piles everywhere and clutter piling up and bills that are not paid, not necessarily because you don't have the money, but because it takes so much effort to take control of those bills, it may be time for you to seek some support. And so knowing what type of support you need is one of the first steps that I would recommend. So get your executive functioning assessment score so that you know where you need the most help.
Listeners, this is not just any quiz. This is a gold standard test that Soul is offering you for free. I would take advantage of that. You might want to find out exactly where you are at in your executive functioning. Don't you want to know? Don't
Absolutely.
Soul, how can executive dysfunction sometimes be mistaken for what they call quiet quitting, disengagement, and the like?
Yeah. Great question. As an employee, quiet quitting is very obvious. It's intentional. You know that you're doing it, and you know that any moment you can just shift. And if you need to perform at higher levels, it's sort of a switch. Like you can do it. You're just choosing not to, either because the accountability isn't there. There aren't very clear KPIs, key performance indicators in your workplace. Your manager may be quiet quitting themselves. There are many factors why people intentionally choose to quiet quit. Executive dysfunction is different. Executive dysfunction is not necessarily a choice, it's an impairment. I liken it much to going into an optometrist, getting your eyes checked, and walking away with a prescription that's unique to your eyes. And then walking away with that prescription, crumbling it, throwing it in the trash, and then going on with your life with impaired vision. Similarly, with the executive functioning assessment, once you get the score and you know where you stand, it's really important that you identify how to build these glasses for your brain, because some of these skills are free. I really mean it. Top number one example that I offer to everyone is just identify your number one priority for the following day. Like, if nothing else, right before you go to sleep, identify your number one priority for the next day. Write it down. I use index cards. The cue cards cue me up for the day. And so I slap it on my nightstand, and that is what drives me for the next day. And I would say that that's a game changer. That is free, and can support you in feeling like you are functioning and you are able to perform at work. And For those of you that are struggling, both at home, at work, through this grieving season, know that you are not alone. And reaching out to Lisa directly for the support is really critical, honestly, because both times when I was grieving, when my miscarriage and grieving my father's death, both times I did not seek support for those two things. I did seek support with my postpartum depression, and it made a world of a difference. And I do wish that I had sought support sooner.
So, if it's any consolation, I did not seek support either when I was in the corporate, and I learned to manage it on my own. I managed, but I really coulda used help. I really coulda used help. Speaking of, how can managers, if there's any managers listening, so how can they support someone who might be struggling at work?
Such a good question. Managers, supervisors, business owners, listen here. Grieving is so hard, and there are many adults that are walking on this planet that have not experienced the death of a loved one or a close loved one. And if you are in that camp and you're supervising people and you happen to come across someone who is grieving, recognize that that person is going through a life altering time that almost feels like time is just standing still and yet flying by all at once. And so, what I would recommend is try first to have a private conversation with the individual. Talk with them and ask them what is appropriate for them to share, because sometimes the person may want everyone to know absolutely nothing about why they're grieving, or they may want to give a very, very specific detail and leave it at that. So, identify the boundary for the person. Also, find ways to identify the priorities for that week or perhaps that month. Help support that individual as best as possible in ways that can be quantifiable, because hitting some benchmarks can feel productive and it can feel like a win. And I think when employees are grieving, giving them and encouraging them to continue at what is most important in the workspace, so what is absolutely critical and a priority, is really helpful. And then finding ways to offer some flexibility in the areas that are more negotiable. So if there are team meetings, group meetings that this person who is grieving may be able to opt out for a couple weeks, that's very helpful. Also, some flexibility with maybe fewer phone calls and fewer meetings for that person for the first few weeks. Thinking about it, I think of it a lot as like an on ramp and an off ramp. So for those who take time off and come back into work, thinking about making that time, that return time, as gentle as possible, so that the person that is grieving can still honor their own human experience and still support the team in what is most important. So, identifying the priorities, back to like my number one tip, identify the priorities and executing them, with support and flexibility on those things that are negotiable, and have a longer timeline where there's maybe not so much pressure for the employee who's grieving to execute right away.
That's excellent, Soul. That's excellent, and employees who are grieving, I say this to you gently, make it known to the workforce that you are grieving. Don't keep it a secret, you're only hurting yourself. You can say as much as you want about your grief, but make it known, even in general sense, that you are grieving, whether it be a death, the loss of a pet, a divorce, any type of relationship breakup, a natural disaster. People need to know so that they can adjust for you. For the most part, people do wanna be helpful. People don't go to work every day wanting to hurt somebody. So, we just need to know and understand and communicate these things.
Absolutely.
People often use the terms burnout and executive dysfunction interchangeably, so what really is the difference? Or would you like to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So there are people who live with executive dysfunction and have lived with it their whole lives. And some people have been diagnosed with, let's say, ADHD. And so some people with ADHD struggle with executive dysfunction independent of any external factors. So that is just their norm, their baseline. And so someone with ADHD who's struggling with executive functioning is already having a really hard time. And without the proper support, skills, like skill sharpening skills and like just like the systems in order to really support the person, it can look like burnout and it can feel like burnout and it can truly be true burnout. You can burn out when you have ADHD and struggling with executive functioning skills. That is a true thing. That is different than, let's say, someone who is having an identity crisis, or let's say a quarter life crisis or a midlife crisis, and is looking around the room or the office or the home and saying, like, wait a minute, like, this is not what I had in mind when I reached 25 or 55. Like, whose home is this or whose life is this? This is not what I had in mind. And feeling exhausted and disappointed, that is a different version. It's almost like burnout can happen to just about anybody, whereas executive dysfunction doesn't necessarily happen to everyone. Some, honestly, some kids are experiencing burnout because they're overscheduled and they're just stretched so thin, and expectations are so high, and the pressure is intense. And so burnout is, I think, more of a social term that we've used to capture exhaustion, truly. But it is different than executive functioning or struggling with executive functioning skills. And I hope that answers your question.
They're perfect. Yes. Yes, because sometimes there's a little question between the 2. In fact, they're sisters, I would say.
Yeah.
So, we can sometimes have executive dysfunctioning at our baseline, and we don't know that we have these executive functioning challenges from our youth even. So, sometimes these major life transitions expose the executive dysfunction or executive functioning challenges. Why do these transitions often expose these challenges?
Such a great question. Our capacity exceeds, like, when we are at our capacity and
Mhm.
life is normal, we don't realize it. We don't
Yeah,
realize it. But when the demands, during a transition particularly, when the demands exceed our capacity, that's when we look around and say, "This is too heavy for me. I cannot
right.
do this alone." So, yeah, it's those transitions, like in this case, let's say we're grieving the death of a loved one. That is a transition, and whether it was a very unexpected life event or sort of a very slow death, I've experienced both. That has been a moment of pure, almost like feeling naked, like, and exposed, just like you said, it's like,
Exposed.
"Wait a minute, like, what is going on here?" I cannot answer any emails right now. I don't want to take any phone calls. I literally just wanna crawl under the covers and just lay in fetal position and hope and pray that I don't have to get up. And that is such a sad space to be in. And truth be told, like, so many of us can probably identify a time or 2 or 10 where we felt that way,
Absolutely.
right? It's like
Absolutely.
it's part of the human experience. I mean, what we know about life is that life is hard. Life is
Mhm.
so hard. And when it becomes really hard and we get these unpleasant surprises or deaths, that's when whatever was keeping us together just breaks, and that safety net just dissolves, and it almost feels, for me personally, I'll tell you what it felt like for me. When I was at my deepest, darkest time, it felt like a dark, endless abyss. It was a spiraling effect into a bottomless abyss. That's what it felt like. And no matter what I said and did, I always felt like I was just going deeper and deeper down this dark abyss. And it is so sad to think that someone on this call who is listening may be feeling that way. And no, please, please, please hear us when we say this. You are not alone. That dark abyss is not forever. And get as much help as you can. Lisa is here. I get choked up thinking about my own dark abyss. And anytime I can offer support, I just want to hug anyone who's going through this right now.
I didn't feel like I was in an abyss, but I did feel like this easiest thing, similar to you, could not be even started or accomplished. I don't know if I was thinking that if I started it, I wouldn't be able to finish it, but I just felt like I was pinballing and bumping against the walls and could not get started. And when I was in that situation, it was scary because I didn't think that I was ever going to come out of it.
And I have to ask, Lisa, how did you get out?
It was I did not get therapy or coaching, I have to confess. I wish I could say I did. I had to make it work. Thank goodness for YouTube. I would get by with helps on organizing and time structuring, and especially so the validation that these YouTubes bring to people. As long as I knew that I wasn't alone and other people were going through it, I knew there was hope. And that's the best thing you can give a person is hope that this too shall pass, right?
Right. That's right, Lisa. That's right. One of the ways that I find this idea of when our demands exceed our capacity, the way I see it manifest very often, particularly in women, is masking. So I am a high masking overperformer, overachiever, individual. And so, even in my darkest times, you wouldn't necessarily know that I was going through a difficult time. And I find that a lot of women mask both physically and also verbally. So, we all know the very predictable answer to this question. How are you? Good. How are you? Right?
Mhm.
Um, I remember a sociology professor of mine encouraged us to, for a week, to test out anytime someone asked, how are you? To answer as honestly and for as long as we possibly could. And I will tell you, like 20 something years later, I still almost always answer honestly and as long as the person is willing to listen, for better or worse, because I just found
Right,
it to be so freeing to be honest about how I'm doing. And I have found shorter ways to be honest as opposed to, well, let me tell you all the things that are happening, but more so like taking it one day at a time. That's my response of saying, hey, listen, I'm not good. Like, I'm not good. If I was good, I would tell you I'm good. I'm not good. I am
right.
literally taking it like one step at a time. I currently have a 1 year old, a 2 year old, and a 7 year old. And so these days, my life is like centered around naps and snacks, naps and snacks. And so I'm taking it one nap at a time. Like the baby goes down, okay, now I can spend time with the toddler and the big kid. Okay, the toddler goes down,
Yeah.
okay, now I can spend time with the baby and the big kid, you know? And it's like this like rotating circle of like how to support my loved ones all while struggling internally, right? And so
Right.
I have found that oftentimes people, particularly women, will mask by looking really good, and not necessarily looking any different than prior to going through a difficult time. So kind of they look the same, maybe even like like you wouldn't necessarily notice a big difference by how they look. And verbally, they may say, I'm fine, you know, I could complain, but I won't," kind of thing, or I'm good, I'm good. And I find that because I love conversation and I love getting in on the nuances of people's lives and coming from a place of support and also learning and growing, I find that when I dig just it doesn't take much, like one or two follow-up questions, and people will start to unravel these feelings and frustrations that they're experiencing, and that's the moment when I look at them and I'm like, "You're not alone, I feel you," you know?
Right.
And I think that's what I find to be most common is this
Mhm.
idea of, like, white knuckle through it all and just kind of, like, don't let anyone see you cry or don't let anyone see you struggle or don't talk about a difficult time. And truth be told, there are spaces where you have to do that. Like, there are just certain spaces
Right.
no one wants to hear it. Like, no one has the time.
Right.
When they ask you, "How are you?" what they're really trying to get to is like, "How what's the turnaround for my priority?" So,
Good
obviously
point.
within, the understanding that it is a space of individuals who are expressing genuine care. But yeah, to that point, I would say scripting is really important, finding scripts that help you. And so there was a time where I could not honestly say that I was good. And so, but I also could not reveal too much because I would just cry if I did. And
Mhm.
so I
Yeah.
developed this script and everyone here is welcome to use it, but I find that it works really well and I use it to this day. So Lisa asked me, "How are you?"
How are you, soul?
Good to see you. And I
You
find
too.
it to be that good, people want to hear good. That's at the end of the day,
Mhm.
people want to be comforted that you're okay, even if you're not okay. And if you say
Right.
anything less than good or other than good, then there's this hesitation. And if I just need to move forward, but I want to be authentic to myself and be honest, I'll say, "Good to see you." And they hear the good. I'm saying something factual because it is good to see that person and there's no need for follow-up unless that person knows me well enough to say, "Okay, and what else?" And then maybe
Right.
I'm willing to shed more and then, also shed some tears while we're at it.
That's great. People who are masking, they're not usually doing it to be pretending or to hide. They just want space to be heard. So when you ask, "Hi, how are you doing?" listeners, be genuine about it. If you really care, do a follow-up question. Something about them. Try to follow up, and that's all they need sometimes to open up a little bit. It's very important to be heard, and that's what these coaching sessions that we offer are for. It's for validation. People want a space to be heard. Hey, so we talked a while about planning to create freedom rather than, let's say, restriction. What does simple weekly planning practice look like for you?
Oh, one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah.
Well, so so my website is called Plan with Soul, like literally plan with soul, like PLAN with WITH and then my name SOL.com. So Plan with Soul. And the idea behind it is sitting down and identifying your priorities. So, whether you're in a transition or not, particularly though, if you are in a transition, planning is so important. People that come to my office or meet with me virtually will often say, "This is so simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. It's very simple." And so, one of the things that I offer is the 84th hour. The idea behind the 84th hour is that there are 168 hours in a week. And if you split that in half, that's 84 hours. So, Monday 8 a.m. through Thursday 8 p.m. is 84 hours. So, I consider Thursday 8 p.m. halftime because after Thursday 8 p.m., you still have another 84 hours to go before Monday 8 a.m. And that really triggers for me this halftime show idea of like at halftime, what do most of us do? We get up, we grab some snacks, maybe we go to the bathroom. And so on Thursday night, you plan for the following Monday through Sunday. And so what happens is that when you go to bed Thursday night, with so much clarity and so much peace, like you know which emails you need to send the next day before the next week because you still have Friday, a whole business day to reschedule, cancel, make appointments, to buy things because you've already looked at the week ahead. You know what's coming. There's this level of stress that just kind of simmers down, and there's this like level of mental peace that people feel. And they're literally, it's like people will look at me like, why didn't anyone teach me to do this? And it's like, I think in school we had our teachers that would welcome us with like maybe a morning circle, and the agenda would be on the whiteboard or chalkboard, and they'd walk us through what to expect. And when we graduated from school, like that morning circle and agenda just kind of disappeared. The idea of that just kind of went away. And I think we need to go back to the basics of like writing down the plan. And I often say your calendar is not your plan. Your calendar is what documents decisions that you've made in the past or facts about what's coming in the future. But a plan requires some time independent of your calendar to add some buffer time, to prepare some paperwork before the appointments, to make calls. And that's something that people sometimes do when they are scrambling at the last minute, and then they're looking for forms at the very last minute, or they're calling someone to reschedule because time blindness, right? The 84th hour is something I offer every Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, excuse me, 8 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific. And the idea behind it is we plan your 7 days for the week ahead. And I can't recommend it enough. I think it's a very simple structure that pays back tenfold, to be honest, because I find that people realize I actually don't have to go to that meeting and I can cancel it now and I don't feel so bad. Or we can make some decisions on Thursday night that will make the following week so much smoother. And so, if you are in a transition like you're grieving, then I know it seems sometimes like you don't want to do certain things. And like what Lisa was saying, like it was really hard for her to be productive and take action. I'm here to support and happy to offer the 84th hour. It's one of my favorite things to do because I make it family friendly. So kids sometimes join in on the fun and they take some autonomy over their own routine and schedule. And so I find that to be a really fun time. So if you are going to, let's say, a basketball game, soccer game, a football game, let's just say, and it's halftime and your team is losing, at no point would you get up, pack up, and go home and say our team lost and like, let's just give up. You would not do that. You would stay for the whole game. The Knicks just won last night, right? And so, like, if at any point people thought like the Knicks weren't going to win and they left, they would have missed history. And so sitting there and in your halftime midpoint of your week and it's Thursday night and you're looking around and you're like, I am so overwhelmed. I'm just going to quietly like just kind of check in on a few people and messages on Friday and then just slide into the weekend. What ends up happening is this cycle of like the Sunday scaries, the Monday blues, and then people will like kind of cheer up on Tuesdays and talk about Taco Tuesday and Hump Wednesday. And then Thursday comes around, it's like, okay, we're almost there. We're almost at the finish line. Friday's almost here. And then quiet quitting again throughout the weekend. And there could be more strategy and systems to your week that may afford you more freedom in the end. And that's to Lisa's point. Planning is actually what offers many of us a ton of freedom, even for those of you that are busy. Once you look ahead, one of the things that I preach and teach is one priority per day, just one, not five, not 10, one priority per day. And so when you look ahead and you map out your 7 priorities for the following week, it's really clear to just trim the fat and figure out what you don't need. And you'll be surprised that in that 168 hours, how much time you actually have left for you.
Maybe that leftover time is a gift to you for a thank you gift for planning.
That's right.
I need to change my planning day, Sol, to Thursday and not Sunday afternoon or evening.
Yeah, you know what I encourage everyone to do? If you're listening, please open your phone, open your alarm, and set an alarm to go off weekly every Thursday at 8 p.m. And it'll just be this reminder, hey, this is a good time for you to plan. Listen, whether you plan alone or plan with Soul, your choice, but plan. And when you set that alarm, it's going to be a visual and auditory reminder that this is a good time, a cue to plan.
But when you plan with soul, you plan with accountability. That's the key right there.
And a lot of
Hey,
fun too.
thank you so much for joining us, Soul, today. And thank you, listeners, for joining us in this episode of Grief Space. Please remember that grief affects far more than our emotions. It can affect how we think, plan, focus, remember, and navigate everyday life. Be encouraged. You're not failing. You're carrying more than your brain can currently process, okay? Your career does not need to suffer because of your loss. And there are tools to get you through this difficult period. You'll find Sol Garcia's contact information, website, complimentary executive functioning assessment, and free resources in the show notes. And you'll also find information about my coaching services in there too. Until next time, be gentle with yourself and make room for your grief. And remember that you can be the boss of your loss.